Sarah Wilson woke at 5:30 a.m. on Mother's Day, just as she had every morning for the past 12 years. Her alarm chimed softly, and she silenced it immediately, careful not to wake Nathan sleeping beside her. He needed his rest for the golf game he'd planned with his buddies later that day. The house was silent as Sarah slid her feet into the slippers waiting beside the bed and made her way downstairs in the dark. These early morning hours belonged to her alone, the only time when the house wasn't filled with demands and expectations. She cherished this small pocket of solitude, even though she spent it preparing for everyone else's day. In the kitchen, Sarah started the coffee first. Nathan liked his strong, 2 scoops per cup, ready the moment he came downstairs at precisely 6:45 a.m. As the coffee machine gurgled to life, she pulled ingredients from the refrigerator: fresh blueberries purchased yesterday, eggs from the carton on the middle shelf, thick-cut bacon from the butcher Tyler's preference, and ingredients for pancakes made from scratch because the box kind never tastes right, according to Nathan. Today was special, so Sarah was going all out. Mother's Day. She pulled out the good china plates, the ones they only used for holidays and company. She arranged strawberries in a pattern, made sure the bacon was crispy but not burnt, and added a sprinkle of powdered sugar to the pancakes. The kitchen filled with the scents of cinnamon, vanilla, and hope. She wanted everything to be perfect. Outside the window, the garden Sarah had meticulously planted and maintained was beginning to bloom. The roses were particularly gorgeous this year because she'd researched the perfect fertilizer and spent hours pruning dead stems. The lawn was immaculate because she'd learned to care for it herself after Nathan complained about the cost of the landscaping service. Tyler's baseball uniform hung by the door, freshly washed and pressed. His cleats were clean, the laces replaced last week when Sarah noticed they were fraying. His water bottle was filled and waiting in the refrigerator. The game schedule was checked 3 times, 2 p.m. home field. Sarah set the table with care. Forks on the left, knives on the right, napkins folded into triangles. She used the crystal bowl Nathan's mother had given them as a wedding gift for the fruit salad. She polished 2 smudges off the surface before filling it. "This year will be different," she whispered to herself. This year they would notice. At 6:42, Sarah heard footsteps on the stairs. Nathan appeared first, already dressed in the golf shirt she'd ironed and hung in his closet last night. Tyler followed still in his pajamas, hair sticking up in 3 directions. Neither of them wished her happy Mother's Day right away. Instead, they exchanged a look, something conspiratorial that made Sarah's stomach tighten with inexplicable dread. Tyler pulled out his phone, angling it toward her. Sarah thought perhaps he wanted to take a picture, something sweet for social media showing what a thoughtful son he was. Nathan held a plain drugstore bag, not wrapped, not even a gift bag with tissue paper, just a plastic bag from the pharmacy down the street. Sarah's heart sank, but she kept smiling. Smiling was what she did. She smiled through disappointment. She smiled through the gradual erosion of her self-worth. She smiled until her face ached from the effort. "Happy Mother's Day," Nathan finally said, handing her the bag with a grin that was too wide, too eager. He looked like someone who believed he'd just executed something incredibly clever. Sarah reached inside and felt ceramic. A mug. For one brief, foolish moment, she allowed herself to hope it might say something meaningful. World's best mom, or even just mom. Something that acknowledged she mattered. She pulled it out and read the words, "World's most pointless woman." And that was when they started laughing. Their laughter didn't stop. It grew louder, feeding on itself, expanding to fill every corner of the kitchen she had scrubbed yesterday. Nathan bent forward, gripping the edge of the counter for support, as if the hilarity had weakened his knees. Tyler had tears streaming down his face, his phone still recording, capturing every microsecond of her humiliation. Sarah stood frozen, holding the white ceramic mug with black lettering in a bold sans serif font. Each word hit separately: worlds. Most, pointless, woman. "Your face," Nathan finally managed between gasps of laughter. "Oh man, your face was perfect." "Tyler, did you get that?" Tyler nodded, replaying the video. "Got it. This is gold. Her shock was gold to them. Her hurt was content to be shared and laughed at. Sarah opened her mouth to speak, but before any words came out, she heard herself laugh instead. It wasn't a real laugh. It was a sound she made with her throat and mouth, a performance of amusement that her body produced automatically after 12 years of training. She had learned to laugh at jokes made at her expense. She had learned to be a good sport. "Well," she said, forcing the corners of her mouth upward, "you're not wrong." Nathan patted her shoulder the way you would pat a dog who'd just performed a trick. That's my girl. Always such a good sense of humor. Then he turned away and sat down at the table. Tyler followed, dropping into his chair with the casual ease of someone who hadn't just participated in cruelty. They began eating the breakfast she had prepared. The pancakes made from scratch, the bacon cooked to the exact texture they preferred, the fruit arranged on the good china. Your golf tee time is at 11, right? Sarah asked, setting the mug down on the counter. Yeah, so I need to leave by 10:30, Nathan said between bites. Oh, and Tyler's got that game at 2. I remembered, Sarah said softly, though neither seemed to hear her. Did you study enough for finals? Nathan asked Tyler. Tyler shrugged. Probably. Neither of them thanked her for breakfast. Neither acknowledged the food, the effort, the hours she had spent preparing it all. Neither apologized for the mug. Neither asked if she was okay. Sarah began clearing the table. Nathan and Tyler didn't move to help. They never did. They simply leaned back in their chairs while she reached around them to gather plates and silverware. In the kitchen, Sarah turned on the water and began washing dishes by hand. They had a dishwasher, a good one she had researched and selected 2 years ago, but she washed the dishes anyway. The mechanical repetition gave her something to do with her hands while her mind worked through what had just happened. Behind her, Nathan and Tyler moved to the living room. She heard the television turn on, the volume rising as they found a basketball game. Their voices carried through the house, discussing player statistics and team rankings. Normal conversation, easy and comfortable, unburdened by awareness that something had broken irreparably in their family. Sarah looked at the mug sitting on the counter. World's most pointless woman. She thought about Tyler's phone recording her shock, capturing her pain to be replayed and shared. She thought about Nathan's complete lack of awareness that he had just destroyed something that couldn't be repaired. He didn't know he had just ended their marriage. He didn't know that the woman washing dishes was already planning her departure. As Sarah dried the dishes and put them away, memories from the past 12 years scrolled through her mind like a silent film of her gradual disappearance. Sarah Wilson hadn't always been the silent figure who moved through rooms straightening pillows and folding laundry. Once she had been Sarah Anderson, marketing coordinator at Reynolds & Burke, a downtown firm where her ideas were valued and her voice was heard. You're on track for senior coordinator, her boss had told her during her last review. The company sees potential in you, Sarah. Then Tyler was born and everything changed. Not immediately. Sarah had taken her 3 months of maternity leave and returned to work with pictures of Tyler on her desk and determination in her heart. For 2 years, she'd managed the delicate balance of career and motherhood. It wasn't easy, but she was making it work. Until Nathan received an opportunity for promotion that would require longer hours and occasional travel. It makes sense for one of us to stay home, he'd said one night after Tyler had gone to bed. My job pays more. My job has better benefits. My job has more potential for growth. The way he'd said my job 3 times in succession made it clear whose career was the priority. And someone needs to be available for Tyler, Nathan had added, for the doctor appointments and school pickups and sick days. Sarah had agreed because she believed in building something together. She believed sacrifice was the foundation of family. She thought they were a team. So she quit. She stayed home. She learned to structure her entire existence around supporting Nathan's advancement and raising Tyler. She attended every parent-teacher conference, even the ones Nathan was too busy to make. She coordinated every school fundraiser, spending hours in PTA meetings, listening to other mothers debate bake sale versus car wash. She remembered every birthday in Nathan's extended family, bought every gift, signed both their names on every card. She learned to cook his mother's recipes exactly the way she made them, even though they required ingredients Sarah had to drive 30 minutes to find at a specialty store. She ironed Nathan's work shirts every Sunday night while he watched whatever game was on television. 5 shirts perfectly pressed hanging in his closet, organized by color. He never thanked her. He just expected them to be there. Sarah transformed their house into something that looked better than when they bought it. She painted walls. She refinished furniture. She planted a garden that bloomed in coordinated colors. When Nathan's colleagues came over for dinner parties, they complimented him on his beautiful home. He accepted their praise without ever mentioning that Sarah had done all the work. Somewhere in all that giving, Sarah forgot to ask what she was receiving in return. Or maybe she was afraid to ask because she already knew the answer. Nothing. She was receiving nothing except the privilege of continuing to give. The warning signs had been there for years. She just refused to see them. Last Mother's Day, Nathan had given her a potted plant he'd picked up at a gas station on his way home from work. The flowers were already wilting the soil dry. It died 2 weeks later because no one watered it except Sarah, which seemed to defeat the purpose of receiving a plant as a gift. The year before that, he'd forgotten entirely until Tyler reminded him at breakfast. Nathan had looked up from his cereal eyes, widening slightly as he realized what day it was, and said, "Oh, Happy Mother's Day." No gift, no card, just 3 words delivered with the same enthusiasm as "pass the salt." Nathan's sister Rebecca had made a joke at a family barbecue last summer. They were all standing around the grill, and someone asked Sarah what she did. Before she could answer, Rebecca laughed and said, "Sarah, she's basically the maid who doesn't get paid." Everyone laughed, including Nathan. He laughed at his sister's joke about Sarah being unpaid domestic labor while she stood there holding a plate of hamburger buns she'd just finished toasting. Tyler started calling her Sarah instead of Mom when he was around his friends. The first time she heard it, they were at his baseball game. One of his teammates asked who she was, and Tyler said, "That's Sarah. Not my mom, just Sarah," like she was someone he barely knew. Nathan began introducing her at work events as "my wife," without using her name, as though her identity was only an appendage to his something that existed in relation to him rather than on its own. These moments accumulated like dust, so gradual that she did not notice she was suffocating until she could barely breathe anymore. She told herself they were stressed. Nathan worked long hours. Tyler was a teenager dealing with school pressure. Boys will be boys. She was being too sensitive. She was overreacting. She was making something out of nothing. She made excuses for them because the alternative was unbearable. And then came this Mother's Day morning with its white ceramic mug bearing 3 words that finally made it impossible to keep pretending. After washing the dishes, Sarah walked past the living room where Nathan and Tyler sat watching television. Neither looked up. Neither noticed her leaving the room. She climbed the stairs to their bedroom and closed the door behind her. Sarah sat down at the small desk in the corner where she kept the household files and opened her laptop. The screen glowed to life, casting blue light across her face. She opened a new browser window in incognito mode and typed one phrase into the search bar: "one-way flights." Her hands were shaking, but not from fear or doubt. From something else entirely. Something that felt like anticipation. Like relief. Like the first breath after being underwater too long. She was leaving. She just had to figure out where. Sarah scrolled through options, considering and dismissing destinations. Too close. Too expensive. Too cold. Too hot. Portland, Oregon. She selected it from the list because it was far enough away that Nathan wouldn't think to look for her there, and because she had never been there before. No memories, no associations, just distance, and the possibility of becoming someone new. The flight left in 2 weeks, 14 days to prepare. 14 days to dismantle a life she had spent 12 years building without anyone noticing what she was doing. Sarah closed the laptop and went downstairs. Nathan and Tyler were still in the living room, absorbed in the basketball game. She walked past them to the laundry room and began sorting clothes. Whites with whites, colors with colors. The same routine she had performed hundreds of times before, except this time she was counting. Counting how many of her own clothes she could pack without creating a noticeable gap in the closet. Counting how many pairs of shoes she could take without leaving empty spaces that might raise questions. Counting days until she would never have to sort Nathan's socks again. That first day set the pattern for the 13 that followed. Sarah became a ghost in her own home, moving through familiar routines while secretly preparing for departure. She packed Tyler's lunch for school the next morning. Turkey sandwich, apple slices, granola bar. The same lunch she had packed hundreds of times before. She left it in the refrigerator with his name written on the bag in marker. She ironed Nathan's shirts for the week 5 of them, organized by color in his closet. She folded his underwear and restocked his drawer with socks. She made sure his gym bag was ready for his Tuesday morning workout. Everything had to appear normal. On Tuesday evening, Nathan had a work dinner, one of those events where spouses were expected to attend, where Sarah was supposed to smile and make pleasant conversation with people who barely remembered her name from one event to the next. She wore a navy dress and pearl earrings. She laughed at his boss Martin's jokes about wives being the real bosses at home, while the men around the table chuckled knowingly. Martin's wife Sandra sat across from her, sipping white wine and nodding along. She and Sarah had attended dozens of these dinners together over the years. They had exchanged recipes and recommendations for dry cleaners. They had made small talk about their children and gardens, but they were not friends. They were accessories to their husbands' careers, pleasant fixtures at corporate gatherings. Sarah smiled at Sandra and asked about her daughter's college search. She talked for 10 minutes about campus visits and application essays. Sarah nodded in the right places and asked follow-up questions that demonstrated she was listening. No one at that table had any idea she was already gone, that in less than 2 weeks she would be on a plane to a city none of them knew she had even considered. On Thursday, Sarah sat in the bleachers at Tyler's baseball game. It was an away game, 40 minutes of driving, to watch her son sit on the bench for 7 innings. He got to bat once in the 9th inning and struck out on 3 pitches. She clapped anyway, along with the other mothers who performed the same ritual of enthusiastic support, regardless of actual performance. Carol Jenkins sat next to her as she usually did. Her son played third base. She talked about the team's chances at making regionals and asked if Sarah was going to volunteer for the end-of-season banquet committee. "I'll check my calendar and get back to you," Sarah told her. She knew she wouldn't be here for the end-of-season banquet. She would be in Portland, starting a new job, living in an apartment that didn't contain any memories of being called pointless. No one noticed she was already elsewhere. She had perfected this performance over years of being functionally invisible, present but absent. Physically here, but mentally somewhere else entirely. At night, after Nathan fell asleep, Sarah transferred money from their joint account to a new account she had opened at a different bank. She kept the amount small, $50 on Monday, $75 on Wednesday, $60 on Friday. Small enough that they wouldn't trigger any alerts, that they would blend into the normal flow of household expenses. The new account was in her name only at a bank across town that Nathan had no connection to. She had opened it on Monday afternoon during the time she usually spent grocery shopping. The account representative, a young woman named Michelle, had processed the paperwork efficiently and handed her a temporary debit card. She didn't ask why Sarah was opening a separate account. She just smiled professionally and wished her a good day. By the end of the first week, Sarah had moved $800 into the new account. Not enough to live on for long, but enough to start. Enough for a security deposit on an apartment. Enough for food until she found work. On Monday of the second week, Sarah scheduled an appointment with an attorney. She found Patricia Adams' name through an online search for divorce lawyers specializing in cases involving financial complexity and asset division. Her website featured testimonials from women who described her as fierce and strategic. That was what Sarah needed. Not sympathy, but strategy. Patricia's office was downtown above a coffee shop called Morning Brew. Sarah told Nathan she was going grocery shopping and would be back in 2 hours. He barely looked up from his laptop when she left. Patricia's office smelled like leather and old books. The furniture was dark wood, substantial and expensive looking. Framed law degrees hung on the wall behind her desk. She was probably in her early 50s, with gray hair cut in a sharp bob and glasses that hung on a chain around her neck. She shook Sarah's hand firmly and gestured for her to sit. Then she pulled out a legal pad and pen and said, "Tell me everything." Sarah told her about the mug, about the laughter, about 12 years of marriage where she had gradually disappeared into the role of unpaid household manager, about giving up her career, about the corporate dinners and the baseball games and the endless invisible labor that made everyone else's life function smoothly. Patricia took notes in precise handwriting, occasionally asking clarifying questions. How long had they been married? Did they own property jointly? What retirement accounts existed? Had there been any documented incidents of verbal abuse or emotional mistreatment? When Sarah finished, Patricia set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. She looked at Sarah with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not pity, something else. Recognition, maybe. "Here's what you need to understand," she said. "The most powerful position you can negotiate from is the one where you have already left. Once you're gone, he can't manipulate you. He can't guilt you. He can't use proximity to wear you down. You control the narrative and the timeline." She explained community property laws. In their state, assets acquired during marriage were considered jointly owned regardless of who earned the income. The house they lived in, purchased 8 years ago, was community property. Nathan's retirement account, funded throughout their marriage, was community property. The investment portfolio he managed, grown during their marriage, was community property. "You sacrificed your career to support his advancement," Patricia said. "That has monetary value. You provided unpaid domestic labor that allowed him to focus on his job without distraction. That has monetary value. You're entitled to half of everything, and I can make sure you get it." She asked if Sarah was ready to fight. Sarah realized she had been ready for years. She just needed someone to tell her she had the right to. She hired Patricia before leaving the office. The attorney gave her instructions for the next steps: document everything, gather financial records, collect evidence of contributions and mistreatment, build an ironclad case. Over the following days, Sarah became an archivist of her own life. She photographed every room in the house, documenting improvements she had made. The walls she had painted, the light fixtures she had installed, the built-in shelving she had designed and paid to have constructed in the living room. She made copies of 12 years of joint tax returns. She downloaded bank statements showing the flow of money during their marriage. She printed performance reviews from her old marketing job, evidence of the career trajectory she had abandoned. She screenshot Tyler's social media posts, the ones where he tagged her as the cook with a laughing emoji, the Instagram story where he filmed her cleaning the kitchen and captioned it "Free Maid Service," the TikTok where he joked about her being his personal Uber driver. She saved emails Nathan had sent to colleagues, the one where he complained about her wanting to attend a work event, calling her high maintenance for expecting to be included, the one where he made a joke about wives and their expensive hobbies, even though her only hobby was maintaining the home he lived in. Each piece of evidence was another brick in the wall she was building between her old life and whatever came next. The file grew larger each day. Documentation of contributions, proof of contempt evidence that she had been here, that she had mattered even if they never noticed. On the morning of her departure, Sarah woke at 5:30 as usual. She made breakfast. Pancakes again, though not the special ones from Mother's Day. Just regular pancakes from the mix in the pantry. She set out Nathan's coffee mug and Tyler's orange juice. They came downstairs at their usual times. Nathan mentioned he had a regional conference that would keep him out until late. Tyler reminded her he had finals this week and would be studying at his friend Marcus's house after school. Neither asked about her plans. Neither noticed she was wearing the burgundy dress Nathan had once criticized for being too fancy for a regular day. Neither saw the suitcase she had loaded into her car at dawn, hidden in the trunk beneath an old blanket. After they left, Sarah walked through the house one final time. She didn't cry. She didn't feel sad. She simply observed rooms that would soon belong to someone else's life. She closed the door behind her without locking it. Let Nathan deal with that when he came home to an empty house. Sarah drove to the airport with her hands steady on the wheel. She felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Not happiness exactly, something more substantial. Freedom. The word came to her as she parked in long-term Lot C and rolled her single suitcase toward the terminal entrance. Freedom. She was free. The airport buzzed with activity as Sarah made her way to the check-in counter. All around her, people rushed to destinations. Business travelers in crisp suits, families herding children, and luggage couples holding hands. Everyone had somewhere to be, someone waiting for them. Sarah had only herself. At the counter, the airline employee asked, "Round trip or one-way, one-way?" Sarah answered, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "Any bags to check?" Sarah gestured to her single suitcase. "Just this one." "Portland's beautiful this time of year," the woman remarked as she tagged the bag. "Visiting family?" "Starting fresh," Sarah replied, and the woman looked up, something like recognition flickering across her face. "Good for you, honey," she said quietly, handing over the boarding pass. "Good for you." 3 hours later, Sarah stood in the Portland International Airport watching rain streak down the windows. The Pacific Northwest welcomed her with its signature weather, a gentle, persistent drizzle that made everything shimmer. She caught a cab outside, giving the driver an address she'd memorized from her online research. "First time in Portland?" the driver asked, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "Yes." "What brings you here?" Sarah watched the unfamiliar city slide by through rain-blurred windows. "A new beginning," she said simply. The taxi pulled up in front of a narrow 3-story building wedged between a vintage clothing store and a Thai restaurant. The neighborhood smelled like coffee and rain-soaked pavement. People walked past with canvas bags and bicycles, moving with the unhurried pace of those who had chosen this area specifically because it didn't demand performance. The landlord, Iris Morgan, waited under an awning, probably in her late 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a loose bun and reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain around her neck. She greeted Sarah with a firm handshake and no unnecessary questions. "You made good time. Flight on schedule." Yes, thank you for meeting me on such short notice. Iris unlocked the street-level door and led Sarah up 2 flights of stairs. The apartment's on the 3rd floor, Unit 3B. It gets good light, especially in the mornings. The apartment was small, one room that functioned as bedroom and living space combined with a kitchenette along one wall and a bathroom barely large enough to turn around in. The furniture was mismatched but clean. A futon with a faded blue cover, a small table with 2 chairs, a bookshelf holding books the previous tenant had left behind. The window looked out over narrow streets lined with old trees that were just beginning to show spring color. It was nothing like the spacious suburban house she had left behind. No granite countertops, no stainless steel appliances, no walk-in closets. Just 4 walls, basic furniture, and silence. It was perfect. The lease is month to month, Iris explained, handing over the keys. First month's rent plus security deposit like we discussed. Trash pickup is Tuesdays. The corner market stays open until 11 Huzares if you need anything. The radiator clanks sometimes, but it works fine. Any questions? Sarah closed her hand around the keys. No, I think I'm all set. Well, I'm in 1A if you need anything. Welcome to Portland, Sarah. Alone in the apartment, Sarah unpacked her single suitcase hanging clothes in the small closet, placing toiletries in the bathroom cabinet. Everything she owned in this city fit in one piece of luggage and still left room for what she had abandoned. That first evening, she walked to the corner market Iris had mentioned. It was the kind of place that sold organic produce alongside conventional brands where hand-lettered signs advertised local honey and fresh-baked bread. Sarah filled a basket with foods she actually liked. Sharp cheddar cheese instead of the mild kind Nathan preferred, sourdough bread instead of whole wheat coffee with actual flavor instead of the bland brand Tyler said was fine strawberries, because she wanted them, not because anyone had requested them. The cashier, a young man with multiple ear piercings and a friendly smile, bagged her groceries and told her to have a nice night. Sarah carried them back to her apartment and arranged everything in the small refrigerator. Her food, her choices, her life. She made dinner from what she had bought. Cheese and bread and strawberries. Simple. Exactly what she wanted. She ate sitting on the fire escape accessible through the window, watching the sun set over rooftops she did not recognize. The sky turned orange and pink and purple colors so saturated they looked artificial. Sarah was alone, completely alone in a city where she knew no one. And she was not lonely. There was a difference she was discovering between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness was wanting company you didn't have. Solitude was choosing to be by yourself and finding peace in that choice. This was freedom. On Monday morning, Sarah updated her resume. 12 years showed as a gap in her employment history, a blank space where a career should have been. She described what she had done during those years in language that translated domestic labor into corporate terminology. Household management became operations coordination. Budgeting became financial planning. Volunteer work became project management and stakeholder relations. She applied to 17 positions at marketing firms throughout Portland. By Wednesday, she had received responses from 5. 3 were polite rejections, citing her extended absence from the field. 2 requested interviews. The first interview was with a large corporate firm downtown. The hiring manager, a man in his 40s wearing an expensive suit, spent most of the meeting asking why she had taken so much time off and whether she was truly committed to returning to work. Marketing has changed dramatically in 12 years, he said, not bothering to hide his skepticism. Everything is digital now, social media strategy, SEO, data analytics. I understand that, Sarah replied. But the fundamentals of connecting with an audience haven't changed. I'm a quick learner, and I've kept up with trends even while I wasn't working professionally. He made a non-committal noise and glanced at his watch. Your skills are likely rusty. We need someone who can hit the ground running. I raised a teenager and managed a household budget through the recession, Sarah said, fighting to keep her voice steady. I coordinated complex schedules, mediated conflicts, and maintained relationships with difficult stakeholders, like my mother-in-law. She tried to inject humor into that last part, but the hiring manager didn't smile. We'll be in touch, he said, standing to signal the interview was over. They both knew they wouldn't be. Sarah left that building feeling deflated. In the elevator down, she caught her reflection in the mirrored wall, a woman in her early 40s trying to look professional in clothes that suddenly felt outdated and wrong. Had she made a terrible mistake? Was she unemployable? How would she support herself if no one would hire her? The practical challenges she hadn't fully considered before leaving now loomed large. Her savings were limited. The apartment, modest as it was, still cost money. She needed health insurance. She needed income. That night, Sarah sat in her small apartment calculating how long she could survive on what she had. 2 months, maybe 3 if she was extremely careful. After that, she didn't allow herself to complete that thought. There was no going back. She would find a way forward whatever it took. The second interview came 2 days later at a place called Horizon Collective. It operated out of a converted warehouse in an industrial neighborhood that was being slowly transformed by artists and small businesses. The building had exposed brick walls and high ceilings with metal beams. Plants hung from hooks, creating small pockets of green throughout the open workspace. Simone Kelly, the hiring manager, met Sarah in a small conference room with a wall of windows overlooking the street. She had silver hair cut in a precise bob and wore dark-framed glasses that gave her an air of sharp intelligence. She shook Sarah's hand firmly and gestured for her to sit. Simone reviewed Sarah's resume in silence for a full minute, her expression neutral. When she reached the 12-year gap, she paused. Sarah braced herself for the usual questions about commitment and relevance. Instead, Simone looked up and asked, "What skills did you develop during this time?" The question surprised Sarah. Not why did you leave work, but what did you learn while you were gone? Sarah took a deep breath and answered honestly. I developed project management skills through coordinating school fundraisers, budget optimization through managing household finances during the recession, stakeholder coordination through navigating relationships with teachers, coaches, extended family, crisis management through handling everything from medical emergencies to last-minute schedule changes. She paused, then added, I became expert at anticipating needs before they were expressed, at resolving conflicts without anyone noticing there was a problem, at making difficult things look easy. Simone listened without interrupting. When Sarah finished, she smiled. That's just parenting and household management translated into corporate language. You have been working. You just weren't getting paid. She explained that Horizon Collective specialized in marketing campaigns for nonprofit organizations. The work required someone who could manage multiple projects simultaneously, communicate effectively with diverse stakeholders, and operate efficiently within tight budgets. Everything I've been doing for 12 years, Sarah said, just with different terminology. Exactly, Simone replied. We need someone who can think creatively about limited resources, someone who understands how to connect with people on an emotional level. Our clients don't have the budgets of big corporations, but their work matters deeply. They need a marketing coordinator who gets that. She offered Sarah the position before she left the building. Marketing coordinator handling campaigns for 3 to 5 nonprofit clients at a time. The salary was modest but livable. The benefits included health insurance and 2 weeks of paid time off. Sarah accepted before reaching the elevator. But even with a job secured, the challenges weren't over. Her first paycheck wouldn't arrive for 2 weeks. Her apartment was sparsely furnished. She had no friends, no support system, no one to call if something went wrong. At night, she lay on the futon listening to the unfamiliar sounds of her new neighborhood. Distant traffic, occasional laughter from the Thai restaurant below the building's old pipes groaning. Sometimes in those quiet hours between midnight and dawn, doubt crept in. Had she overreacted to the mug? Was she being dramatic? What kind of mother leaves her son? What kind of wife disappears without explanation? Then she would remember the laughter. Nathan bent double, gasping for breath at her expense. Tyler filming her humiliation for social media. No, she hadn't overreacted. She had finally responded appropriately to years of diminishment. Her phone had been on silent since she left home. On Thursday evening, she finally checked it. 43 text messages, 17 missed calls, 3 voicemails. The texts from Nathan followed a predictable progression. Confusion first, where are you? When are you coming home? Then annoyance. This is really inconvenient, Sarah. Tyler has a game and I have work. You need to come back and handle your responsibilities. Then anger. What kind of mother abandons her family? People are asking questions and I don't know what to tell them. The messages grew more desperate as days passed. At least tell me you're okay. You're scaring Tyler. But Tyler had not sent any messages. Nathan was using their son as leverage, assuming guilt would drag her back to a life she had already left. Sarah did not reply to any of them. On Friday morning, exactly 3 days after her departure, Patricia sent the automated email they had drafted before Sarah left. Brief, professional, devoid of emotion. I have left. All future communication will go through my attorney, Patricia Adams, who can be reached at the following email and phone number. Nathan's response arrived within minutes. You can't just leave. This is abandonment. I will make sure everyone knows what you did. You will regret this. Sarah didn't reply. Patricia was right. He couldn't manipulate what he couldn't reach. Sarah started her job at Horizon Collective the following Monday. She arrived 30 minutes early wearing the most professional outfit she had packed, a navy blue dress with a matching blazer. The receptionist, a young woman with a nose ring and brightly colored hair, welcomed her warmly and showed her to a small desk in the open workspace. Simone will be in at 9 to get you set up, she explained. I'm Maya, by the way. If you need anything, coffee, office supplies, lunch recommendations, just ask. Sarah's desk had a computer, a small plant, and a welcome card signed by the team. Such a simple gesture, but it made her throat tight with unexpected emotion. When was the last time anyone had welcomed her anywhere? Simone arrived precisely at 9, carrying 2 cups of coffee. I didn't know how you take it, so I brought cream and sugar packets, she said, setting 1 cup on Sarah's desk. Black is fine, thank you, Sarah replied, surprised by the thoughtfulness. Let's get you oriented. Simone pulled up a chair beside Sarah's desk rather than asking her to come to her office. She explained Horizon Systems introduced the current projects and outlined expectations. We're a collaborative team here, Simone said. Everyone pitches in. Everyone's ideas matter. We don't have a strict hierarchy, though I do have final approval on campaigns. Questions so far? Sarah had many but one dominated her thoughts. Why did you hire me? You must have had candidates without a 12-year resume gap. Simone considered her for a moment. When I was 32, I left a corporate marketing position to care for my mother who had Alzheimer's. I spent 7 years as her caretaker. When she passed, I couldn't get hired anywhere because of the gap in my employment. So I started Horizon. And I promised myself I would look at the whole person, not just the resume. She smiled. Besides, you have incredible untapped potential. I'm betting on that. By the end of her first week, Sarah had been assigned 2 clients, a literacy nonprofit and a food bank. She dived into the work with enthusiasm, grateful for the chance to use her mind for something besides coordinating baseball schedules and planning dinner menus. Her coworkers were welcoming and diverse, people of various ages, backgrounds, and lifestyles. No one judged her for starting over at 42. No one treated her like she was invisible. In meetings, people actually listened when she spoke. They wrote down her ideas. They asked follow-up questions. They valued her input. It was a revelation. Still, Sarah established careful boundaries between her work life and her personal situation. She didn't mention Nathan or Tyler or why she had come to Portland. She kept conversations focused on projects and clients. She wasn't ready to share her story. Not yet. Meanwhile, her phone continued to accumulate messages from Nathan. He alternated between anger and pleading, "You need to come home, this is ridiculous." "Whatever I did, I'm sorry, just talk to me." "You can't take half of everything I've worked for just because your feelings were hurt." "Tyler misses you. Don't punish him for whatever issue you have with me." Sarah forwarded each message to Patricia without responding directly. The attorney advised her to maintain complete silence. Let him dig himself deeper with each desperate, controlling text. On Sunday night, 2 weeks after her departure, Sarah was sitting in a cafe called Bread and Ink with her laptop open, working on a campaign proposal for the homeless youth organization, when her phone buzzed with a notification she hadn't expected to see. Someone had tagged her in a Facebook post. Sarah had left her account active but dormant, not posting or engaging since her departure. The notification came from Nathan's profile. Her finger hovered over the screen for a moment before she opened it. The photograph was from their last family vacation, a beach trip to the Oregon coast they had taken 8 months earlier. In the image, she stood on the sand with her arm around Tyler. Both were smiling, sunburned, wearing the relaxed expressions of people enjoying a holiday. Behind them, the ocean stretched blue and calm under a cloudless sky. Sarah remembered that trip clearly. She had spent most of it in the rental kitchen preparing meals while Nathan went deep-sea fishing with a charter company he had researched for weeks. Tyler had complained about being bored and spent his time on his phone. She had smiled for this photograph, because that was what you did on family vacations. You smiled and pretended everything was fine and documented happiness for people back home to see. Nathan's caption made her stomach tighten with anger. Please, if anyone sees her, tell her we just want her home. We love her and miss her. Sarah, if you're reading this, we are sorry. Please come back. Tyler is devastated. The post had been published 3 hours earlier. It already had over 200 reactions and 60 comments. Sarah scrolled through them, slowly reading each one. His colleague Brian from the regional office. Praying for you, man. Hope she comes home safe. Their neighbor Margaret. Oh, Nathan, this is so heartbreaking. We're all thinking of you and Tyler. Sandra from the work dinners. Sending strength to your family during this difficult time. The narrative Nathan had constructed was masterful in its manipulation. He was the devoted husband desperate for his wife's safe return. Tyler was the traumatized son missing his mother. Sarah was the unstable woman who had inexplicably vanished, possibly experiencing a mental health crisis that made her a danger to herself. No one questioned his version of events. No one asked why a dedicated wife and mother who had spent 12 years sacrificing everything would suddenly disappear. They simply accepted that she was the problem, that something was wrong with her, that Nathan and Tyler were the victims of her irrational behavior. Sarah closed the laptop and left the cafe. Back in her apartment, she created a fake Facebook account. She used a stock photo of a golden retriever she found online as the profile picture. She named the account Bailey Thompson, a generic name that could belong to anyone. Through this account, she could watch Nathan's performance without him knowing she was observing. The comments on his post continued to accumulate throughout the evening. Nathan's mother, Patricia. Praying for your family, Nathan. Sarah always seemed fragile to me. I hope she gets the help she needs. His sister, Rebecca. You are so strong for handling this with grace. Tyler is lucky to have you. More neighbors, more colleagues, more acquaintances from Tyler's school and sports teams. Everyone expressing sympathy for Nathan, everyone offering prayers and support, everyone sharing the post to extend its reach further. The women from the PTA, women Sarah had spent hundreds of hours volunteering alongside, coordinating fundraisers and organizing events, expressed shock that she could do something so selfish, vanishing without explanation, abandoning her family, leaving her husband to manage everything alone. Only one person commented something different. Lisa Martinez, a woman Sarah barely remembered from Tyler's elementary school years. Her son had been in Tyler's 3rd grade class. They had exchanged pleasant conversation a few times at school pickup, but had never been close. Lisa's comment read, "Has anyone considered asking why she left?" Sarah stared at those 8 words. Someone had asked the question no one else seemed willing to consider. Why would a woman who appeared devoted to her family suddenly leave? What had happened that no one was discussing? Lisa's comment received no likes. Within an hour, 2 people had responded to her, "This is not the time for blame, Lisa. Nathan is going through enough without people questioning him." Lisa did not comment again. Sarah screenshot everything. Nathan's post, the comments, the reactions, the narrative he was building about her instability and his victimhood. All of it documented and saved in a folder she labeled Evidence. On Monday morning, exactly 1 week after Nathan's Facebook post, Patricia filed divorce papers on Sarah's behalf. She had prepared them meticulously over the previous days, incorporating everything Sarah had provided during their consultations. The petition requested a temporary restraining order, preventing Nathan from contacting Sarah directly. All communication would go through Patricia. The filing included a comprehensive accounting of marital assets. The house purchased 8 years ago, currently valued at $420,000, with $200,000 remaining on the mortgage. Nathan's retirement account through his employer, containing approximately $180,000. An investment portfolio managed by his financial advisor, valued at $95,000. His pension, which would mature in 12 more years. The paperwork itemized Sarah's contributions in language that translated unpaid labor into monetary value. 12 years of household management, childcare, meal preparation, home maintenance, social coordination. Patricia had calculated what Sarah would have earned had she continued her marketing career with normal advancement, promotions every 3 to 4 years, salary increases matching industry standards. The number was staggering when accumulated over 12 years. The filing included a statement explaining why Sarah had left ongoing emotional mistreatment and disrespect, culminating in the Mother's Day incident, where she received a mug labeling her as pointless, while her husband and son laughed and recorded her humiliation for social media distribution. Patricia arranged for the papers to be served to Nathan at his office. She selected the timing deliberately. Wednesday afternoon during a meeting with his regional manager and 2 colleagues. The process server entered the conference room, asked for Nathan Wilson by name, and handed him the envelope in front of everyone. Maximum impact, maximum humiliation. Sarah felt no guilt about the public nature of the service, only satisfaction that he would experience a fraction of what she had felt standing in that kitchen holding the mug. That evening, Sarah made a decision. She reactivated her own Facebook account dormant since her departure. Her profile photo was outdated, showing a version of herself from 3 years ago at a company picnic, smiling in a way that no longer resembled how she looked or felt. She had taken a photograph of the mug before leaving. A simple image with the mug centered against a white background, the black lettering clearly legible, "World's Most Pointless Woman." She uploaded this photograph and wrote a caption, "On Mother's Day, my husband and son gave me this mug. They laughed like it was a joke. I smiled, cleared the table, and washed the dishes. That night I booked a one-way ticket. To everyone asking where I went somewhere I am not pointless." She did not tag Nathan. She did not tag Tyler. She did not name them or provide additional context. She simply stated facts and let the image speak for itself. Sarah posted it at 9:30 on Wednesday evening and closed the laptop. She did not watch for reactions. She took a bath, read 3 chapters of the novel on her nightstand, and went to sleep. By morning, the post had been shared 500 times. By noon, 3,000 times. Her phone, which she had silenced, showed 147 notifications. The narrative was no longer Nathan's to control. When Sarah checked her notifications the next morning, she was overwhelmed by the response to her post. Thousands of shares, hundreds of comments, messages from women she hadn't spoken to in decades, college friends, former coworkers, distant relatives. "I always knew something was wrong. You were too good for him. Thank you for sharing this. My ex did similar things." The comments overflowed with support and recognition. Women sharing their own stories of being diminished, of being treated as functionaries rather than partners, of being expected to laugh at their own devaluation. More significantly, the narrative around Nathan's post had shifted dramatically. People began commenting with questions. Why had he given his wife such a cruel gift? What kind of husband treats the mother of his child with such disrespect? The sympathetic reactions turned skeptical. The prayers turned to criticism. Several women who had attended those corporate dinners with their own husbands sent private messages. Sandra, who had sat across from Sarah making small talk, wrote, "I always sensed something was off in how he spoke to you. I'm sorry I never said anything." Nathan's Facebook post was suddenly recontextualized, not as the plea of a desperate husband, but as the manipulation of a man trying to control a narrative that was slipping away from him. Sarah watched it unfold through her fake Bailey Thompson account, documenting everything with screenshots. The shift in public opinion, the questions people were finally asking, the recognition that maybe, just maybe, the devoted wife had not left without reason. Nathan attempted damage control that evening. He posted a lengthy statement claiming the mug had been a joke taken out of context, that he had never intended to hurt Sarah, that he loved her and wanted to work on their marriage. The post was carefully worded, likely reviewed by someone with communications experience, but it rang false. The comment section became a battlefield. Some people defended him. Most did not. The conversation had changed, and he could not change it back. 4 days after Nathan's failed damage control attempt, Sarah received an email from Tyler. The message appeared in her inbox late on a Thursday evening while she was working on the literacy campaign at her kitchen table. The email was formal in a way that felt unnatural for a 15-year-old. The sentences were carefully constructed, the tone measured and controlled. Sarah could tell Nathan had reviewed it before Tyler sent it. "Mom, I don't understand why you left. I miss you. Can we talk?" The message was short, only 3 sentences, but Sarah could read the layers beneath the words. The confusion was genuine. Tyler was 15, old enough to recognize cruelty when he saw it, but young enough to still believe his father's narrative about jokes and overreactions and wives who couldn't take harmless pranks. Sarah sat with the email for an hour before responding. She wrote and deleted 3 different versions before settling on something that balanced firmness with compassion. "Tyler, I love you, but I need space to rebuild my life. What happened on Mother's Day was not a joke. Filming someone's humiliation and posting it online is not how you treat people you respect. When you're ready to have an honest conversation about that, I'm here." She did not hear back immediately. The silence stretched for 3 days. Sarah returned to her routines. working at Horizon Collective during the day, attending pottery class in the evenings, running along the river each morning before the city fully woke. Then on Sunday afternoon, a second email arrived, shorter this time. The formality was gone, replaced by something that sounded more like Tyler's actual voice. "You're right. I'm sorry. Dad is really angry about the divorce. Can I visit you?" Sarah replied within minutes, providing her address and listing the weekends when she was available. The door was open. He just had to choose to walk through it. 2 weeks later, Tyler arrived on a Friday evening. He had taken the Greyhound bus from home, a 4-hour journey that Nathan had refused to facilitate. When Sarah asked Tyler about the refusal in a text message coordinating his visit, he responded simply, "Dad says if I want to see you, I can figure it out myself." Sarah met him at the bus station downtown. He stepped off carrying a backpack and wearing a jacket that looked too thin for the Portland weather. He had grown since she last saw him, not dramatically, but enough that she noticed immediately. He looked older, more tired. The easy confidence of childhood had been replaced by something more guarded. They walked to a restaurant 3 blocks from Sarah's apartment, a place called the Brass Tap that served burgers and had booths with high backs that created privacy. They sat across from each other, and for the first 15 minutes, neither addressed anything of substance. Tyler told her about his classes. Sarah asked about the baseball season. He mentioned a friend who had moved to California. She described her new job without going into detail about why she had needed a new job in the first place. The conversation felt performative, both of them circling around what actually needed to be discussed. Then Tyler set down his burger, wiped his hands on a napkin, and looked at Sarah directly. "Dad is really angry," he said. "He says you're trying to destroy him." Sarah met his eyes and kept her voice level. "I'm not trying to destroy anyone. I'm protecting myself from being destroyed." Tyler looked down at his plate, picking at his fries without eating them. "He says you're taking everything. The house is retirement money, all of it. He had to move into a smaller place because of the divorce settlement." Sarah had anticipated this conversation. Patricia had warned her that Nathan would use Tyler as a messenger, would present himself as the victim of an unfair system designed to punish men. She chose her words carefully. Tyler, the settlement was determined by a judge based on state law. Assets accumulated during a marriage are considered jointly owned regardless of who earned the income. "I gave up my career to support your father's advancement and to be available for you. That sacrifice has value. I'm not taking anything that isn't legally mine." He continued picking at his fries. "He makes it sound like you just left because you were bored or something, like you got tired of being a mom and decided to start over." "Is that what you think?" Sarah asked quietly. Tyler hesitated. "I don't know what to think. You were just gone. One day you were there making breakfast like always, and the next day you were gone and Dad was freaking out and everyone at school was asking if I was okay." Sarah leaned forward slightly, keeping her hands visible on the table. "Can I ask you something honestly? Do you remember what you and your father gave me for Mother's Day?" His expression shifted. Discomfort crossed his face. "The mug," he said softly. "Do you remember what it said?" He nodded slowly. "World's most pointless woman." "Did you think that was funny at the time?" Tyler looked away, staring at something over her shoulder. "Dad said you would think it was funny. He said you always had a good sense of humor about stuff like that." "Did I look like I thought it was funny?" Tyler was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "No, you looked hurt, but then you laughed, so I thought maybe it was okay." "I laughed because that's what I had trained myself to do," Sarah explained. "I laughed because I had spent 12 years being the person who could take a joke, who didn't make things uncomfortable, who smiled through being treated like I didn't matter. But it wasn't okay, Tyler. And filming my reaction and planning to post it online wasn't okay either." Tyler's face flushed. "I didn't post it. I was going to, but then you left and it seemed weird to post it after that." "Why were you going to post it in the first place?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know. Dad thought it would be funny, like showing that our family could joke around with each other." "At my expense," Sarah added. "I guess I didn't think about it like that." Sarah took a deep breath and chose her next words carefully. "Tyler, I need you to understand something. I didn't leave because I was bored or tired of being a mother. I left because staying was destroying who I was as a person. I had made myself so small, had given up so much of myself that I barely existed anymore, except as someone who served other people's needs. The mug wasn't the cause. It was just the final piece of evidence that showed me how little I was valued." Tyler met her eyes again. Was it really that bad living with us? Sarah didn't sugarcoat it. Yes, it was. They sat in silence for several seconds. The restaurant noise continued around them, other conversations and laughter from other tables, but their booth felt isolated from all of it. I'm sorry, Tyler said finally. I never thought about it that way. I just thought that's how things were. Dad worked and you did everything else. I didn't think about whether it was fair. You were a child, Sarah said gently. It wasn't your responsibility to think about whether your parents' marriage was equitable. But you're not a child anymore. You're 15, old enough to recognize when someone is being treated poorly, even if that person is your mother. He nodded slowly. Dad talks about you differently now, like you're the enemy or something. It's weird. How do you feel about it? I don't know. Confused, I guess. I miss how things used to be, but I'm also starting to understand why you couldn't stay. He paused, then added, Can I visit again, like regularly? Yes, Sarah said, feeling something tight in her chest begin to loosen. Anytime you want. The door is always open. They talked for 3 more hours. Tyler asked about her job, her apartment, what Portland was like. Sarah asked about his plans for college, whether he was still playing baseball, how he was handling his father's anger. The conversation wasn't perfect. There were awkward pauses and moments of discomfort, but it was honest in a way their previous relationship had never been. The preliminary divorce hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday morning in late October, 6 months after Sarah's departure. Patricia had prepared her for what to expect: a sterile courtroom, a judge who had heard hundreds of similar cases arguments from Nathan's attorney, attempting to minimize her contributions and maximize his entitlement. The courtroom smelled like floor polish and old coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a flat, institutional glow. Nathan arrived wearing a tailored navy suit that Sarah had helped him select 2 years ago for a regional conference. He looked every inch the successful professional wronged by circumstances beyond his control. His attorney was exactly what Sarah expected. A man in his 60s with silver hair and an expensive watch, carrying himself with the casual arrogance of someone accustomed to winning. He sat beside Nathan at the plaintiff's table, reviewing documents with an air of bored confidence. Patricia sat beside Sarah, wearing a practical gray blazer and minimal jewelry. Her demeanor was calm-focused, completely unruffled by the performance happening across the aisle. She had told Sarah during their preparation that judges saw through theatrics quickly. What mattered was documentation and law. Nathan's attorney opened with the argument Patricia had predicted. Nathan had been the primary earner throughout the marriage. He had built the retirement account and investment portfolio through his own labor and financial discipline. Sarah had chosen to leave her career, a decision no one had forced upon her. Now she was attempting to claim half of assets she had not earned. The argument was delivered smoothly, with just enough sympathy for Nathan to make him seem reasonable rather than vindictive. Sarah watched the judge's face for reaction and saw nothing. She listened without expression, taking occasional notes. Patricia's counterargument was devastating in its precision. She presented the career sacrifice Sarah had made, including documentation of her job performance and trajectory before leaving. She showed the opportunity cost calculations, demonstrating what Sarah would likely have earned with normal advancement over 12 years. She displayed evidence of unpaid domestic labor that had allowed Nathan to focus on his career without distraction. Then she introduced the screenshots. Nathan's emails to colleagues where he joked about Sarah being high maintenance for wanting to attend company events, his text messages to friends complaining about having to help with household tasks during weeks when she was sick. Tyler's social media posts labeling her as free maid service. The judge's expression shifted slightly, not dramatically, just enough to indicate she was seeing something that changed her assessment. Nathan's attorney objected, claiming the screenshots were taken out of context and represented isolated incidents rather than patterns. Patricia calmly noted that isolated incidents spanning 12 years constituted a pattern. When both sides finished their arguments, the judge reviewed her notes in silence for what felt like an extended period. The courtroom was completely quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of footsteps in the hallway outside. Finally, she looked up and spoke. Her voice was measured, professional, carrying the weight of someone who had made these determinations many times before. Choosing to prioritize one spouse's career over another's does not diminish the contributing spouse's entitlement to marital assets. The evidence presented demonstrates substantial unpaid labor that directly benefited the earning spouse's career advancement. Temporary spousal support is granted in the amount of $3,000 per month effective immediately pending final divorce settlement. Nathan's face flushed red. His attorney leaned over to whisper something that Sarah couldn't hear. Patricia remained completely still beside her expression neutral, but Sarah caught the smallest hint of satisfaction in her eyes. Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Not happiness exactly, something more substantial. Vindication. The recognition that her contributions had value, that her sacrifice had meaning, that the law saw what Nathan had refused to acknowledge. The temporary support payments began the following week, $3,000 deposited into her account on the first of each month. The amount was enough that Sarah could reduce her hours at Horizon Collective from full-time to 30 hours per week, giving her space to focus on other aspects of rebuilding her life. Sarah enrolled in a professional certification program for advanced digital marketing strategy. The coursework was challenging in ways she had forgotten she enjoyed, requiring analysis and creativity and strategic thinking that felt like exercising muscles she hadn't used in years. She also started therapy with Dr. Angela Morrison, a counselor Patricia had recommended who specialized in helping women recover from emotionally abusive relationships. Her office was in a converted house near downtown, with comfortable furniture and windows that looked out onto a garden someone tended carefully. In their first session, Dr. Morrison asked Sarah to describe her marriage in one sentence. Sarah thought for a moment and said, "I spent 12 years making myself smaller so someone else could feel bigger." Dr. Morrison nodded slowly and wrote something in her notebook. Then she looked up and said, "Now we teach you how to take up space again." Learning to take up space again required more than Dr. Morrison's guidance and certification courses. It required confronting the relationships Sarah had left behind and determining which ones could be rebuilt and which needed to remain in the past. Tyler visited most weekends now. He took the bus on Friday afternoons and stayed until Sunday evening. Sarah had made space for him in her small apartment. A futon that converted to a bed, a drawer for clothes he left between visits, a shelf in the bathroom for his toothbrush and deodorant. They established new routines together. Saturday morning runs along the Willamette River. Brunch at a cafe called Stepping Stone that made incredible corn pancakes. Afternoons exploring different neighborhoods of Portland. They talked, really talked, about school and friends and future plans. Tyler shared that Nathan had started dating someone new, a woman named Jennifer, who was 32, a full decade younger than Sarah. Tyler described her as nice, but already showing signs of exhaustion from trying to meet Dad's expectations while maintaining her own career as a dental hygienist. "I don't want to become like Dad," Tyler said one evening while they were washing dishes after dinner. "I don't want to make someone feel the way he made you feel." "Awareness is the first step," Sarah replied, drying a plate carefully before putting it away. "Growth comes from choosing differently every single day, especially when choosing differently is uncomfortable or requires more effort." They had difficult conversations during these visits, about the mug and the laughter, and his role in documenting her humiliation about the years when he had treated her as infrastructure, rather than as a person, about the assumptions he had made regarding how marriages functioned and how parents should be treated. Tyler owned his mistakes without deflecting responsibility onto his youth or his father's influence. He was becoming a better man than Nathan had ever been. That realization brought Sarah more satisfaction than any divorce settlement or job promotion ever could. 6 months after Sarah's departure, the divorce was finalized. She returned to the same courthouse, the same sterile room with fluorescent lighting and the smell of floor polish. Patricia sat beside her. Nathan sat across the aisle with his attorney, both wearing expressions of barely concealed frustration. The judge reviewed the final settlement agreement and declared the marriage legally dissolved. Sarah received exactly what the preliminary hearing had established: half the equity from the house, forcing Nathan to sell and relocate to a smaller property, half his retirement account, half the investment portfolio. The settlement was fair, calculated precisely according to state law, distributed according to clearly established legal precedent. Nathan glared at Sarah across the courtroom as the judge spoke. She looked back at him and felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even relief. Just the quiet certainty that she had made the right choice 6 months ago and every day since. Outside the courthouse, Patricia shook Sarah's hand. "You did it. You got out and you survived." Sarah corrected her gently. "I did more than survive. I rebuilt." Patricia smiled. "Yes, you did." As Sarah walked to her car, she made a decision she had been considering for weeks. She stopped at the county clerk's office on her way home and filed paperwork to reclaim her maiden name, Sarah Anderson, the name she had been born with, the name that belonged to her before she had merged her identity with someone else's. The woman who had been Sarah Wilson no longer existed. She had died the day she stood in a kitchen holding a mug that called her pointless and decided she was finished accepting that assessment.